I also spoke to Noura Erakat, a human rights attorney and a Palestinian American professor. What would you think an evacuation of Rafah would mean for those who have set up there? We know that, as we were just discussing, there are tens of thousands of civilians who are there at the moment.
Very devastating day, as much as it's not surprising because Israel has made its intent clear. Its war cabinet has made its intent clear from the very beginning. In the first week of October 7th has told us that its goal is to depopulate Gaza. They have equated the decimation of Hamas, which they cannot achieve militarily, with the depopulation of the entire Gaza Strip. We have seen a pattern and practice of that. They moved them below the Wadi Gaza line, from the north to below the Wadi Gaza line. They moved them to Khan Yunis. They did not provide them safe quarter. They have now removed them to Mawasi. They were not provided safe quarter. Okay. There are now 1.5 million of the 2.2 million people in the Gaza Strip, in Rafah, who are now told that they do not have safe quarter. There is a pattern in practice indicating that Israel is aiming to depopulate the Gaza Strip in the name of decimating Hamas, which all international law prohibits, including the crime of all crimes, which is tantamount to genocide. This is a genocide.
I want to jump in there just to ask you about this, because, of course, the Israeli government and the military, the spokesman we just heard from, say obviously the goal they have, their stated aim is indeed, as you've said, is to eliminate Hamas. They have also said that it is Hamas itself that is putting Palestinians under threat by having over years built their infrastructure in and embedded among civilian populations. What's your response to that?
Let's be clear, first and foremost, there is no military solution. Israel cannot decimate Hamas. It has not had red lines for nearly 4 months. It has destroyed all of the hospitals, all of the universities, killed 27,000 Palestinians, created a situation of starvation and a humanitarian crisis. And intelligence tells us that they have only destroyed 20% of Hamas fighters who still have the capacity to shoot rockets from the middle of Gaza City. Obviously, they're either an awful army or their goal is not decimating Hamas, which they cannot achieve militarily. They want to depopulate the Gaza Strip. Avi Dichter told us as much on November 12th, 2023, when he said that this is the Gaza Nakba 2023. As to the talking points, those are talking points. I don't understand why we would trust any spokesperson of a belligerent state to tell us what they're doing or not doing. I would get the UN observers. I would get the agencies who can tell us more impartially. They have not demonstrated that they have been used as human shields, though they've used this talking point since 2006. And in the case, I heard the spokesperson say that Hamas was harboring the UNRWA aid and selling it back. Just this week, Israel targeted a UN convoy with food. Just on the 7th, Israel targeted a group of Palestinians waiting for water. So we have to push back against what is
right. And I want to jump in there to ask you a question about this, because we are seeing, as we mentioned just earlier, this national security memorandum in the U.S. about certain conditions to aid to countries, for military aid to countries. And there have been negotiations. They didn't lead to a ceasefire this week. But are you confident that we might see, with this growing international pressure, both sides come to the table and reach some sort of ceasefire agreement that would get that aid in and stop the fighting in the meantime?
Let's be clear, this is not a both sides issue. Hamas has already said that it's willing from the first week to release all the hostages. Israel has imposed a 17-year siege on the Gaza Strip, which has condemned them to slow death. It has condemned them to 56 years of prolonged military occupation that the ICJ will also be reviewing in the middle of this month of February. It has condemned them to 75 years of settler-colonial removal and apartheid. In this situation, Hamas has made clear that it'll release all the hostages and has released them through negotiations. It was Israel that rejected the ceasefire proposal this week.
For demands,
and it was the United States which has vetoed the ceasefire resolutions in the Security Council. And so here the impediments to international rule of law, to the will of the international community, even to U.S. domestic support for a ceasefire has been the United States, particularly the Biden administration, and Israel.
And just a quick last question. We just have about 30 seconds left. What do you want to see happen next from the international community then, if you're not confident that the players at the table right now are able to achieve that?
They need to do everything in their power to end a genocide that's happening on a live stream. There are children that are sleeping in chicken farms and chicken coops in Rafah and farms. We have left children who are babies that are suckling on dates and solid foods because they cannot have formula. And all of these countries have the capacity to end their weapons transfers to Israel, as has Belgium, as has Japan in cutting off military contracts. There are countries that can end diplomatic ties, as has South Africa, as has Ireland. There is an arsenal of diplomatic means in order to end a genocide, and yet what we're hearing instead is a number of condemnations, thoughts, and prayers. Leave that to the pious who are praying, and for states, we ask you to act, and for state actors, if you are in a situation where your government is part of the problem, we ask you to resign.
Noura, we've unfortunately run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today on BBC News.
Thank you for having me.